it's been very unique experience actually as a filmmaker, because more or less everybody which I asked and introduced to play said yes to be part of this. It's I have this extraordinary talented actors, British cast, and they all want to become a part and play this. This is kind of a small independent movie. We had a budget of $14–15 million, and we had to shoot everything in 8 weeks. And they all said yes. I mean, Keira said yes. After we sat down and talked, I had to bully her agent a little bit. But
I screamed at my agent very publicly. She's about this big and blonde, but she has forgiven him.
So no, it was really good. Benedict came on board. We Skyped together, and I had prepared everything to sort of convince him to do this, and he started out by trying to to ask if he could be part of this. So it's I felt that everybody wanted to be part of the story of Alan Turing and to sort of like get it right and do sort of honor to this man, which we owe so much, and it's almost like his spirit was floating through this whole project. Actually, it's both in front of the camera and behind the camera, all these amazing talent. I mean, listen to this music that Alexander wrote. It's phenomenal.
I should mention part of the sort of ramped up kind of volume of feeling that you have for the man after getting to know him through the duration of the film is really kind of exacerbated by the frustration and anger, not just at the injustice served him, but also the fact that why don't I know this story? The overwhelming reaction I've heard from a lot of people, they know bits of it, but not the whole story. And it seems unbelievable that someone who was a war hero, someone who was is the father of the modern computer age and a gay icon, could remain in such relative obscurity to the scale of his achievements in his brief time on this planet. And it was one of the main reasons that I was really attracted to playing him, was to try and bring his story to as wide an audience as possible. And as I read Graham's script, you meet this person who's incredibly confident, but in a very diffident and different way, and he peels back layer after layer through the script and your understanding of him and how you read it, and at the same time as the sort of thriller aspect of the enigma code being cracked, you're getting to understand who this person is at the centre of the story. And then I went away and I started reading about him, and it still seems unfathomable to me that he's not on banknotes, that he's not on the front cover of history textbooks. No, I'm serious. I mean, Newton and Darwin are on banknotes, for Christ's sake. This man is, as acknowledged by Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and other sort of titans of the digital age, Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, just everyone, we were at that incredible, you went the day before, but I went to an amazing award ceremony, breakthrough award ceremony, and they hold him as the forefather of modern computing. He built on things that were already in existence as ideas that Ada Lovelace and Charles Babbage had begun centuries before, but he was extraordinarily important man. So why on earth isn't he on a banknote? And also history books. Why isn't he somebody who's celebrated? Have you already said this? Yeah,
he basically only said Benedict Cumberbatch.
I'm stealing. But yeah, no. I just think he should be celebrated as a social, cultural hero, as well as someone of extraordinary importance in the scientific world and the modern world.
Yeah, it's a remarkable story. Is it easy playing a genius?
And I dream even smarter. I did once build a computer in my sleep. I've just remembered that. That's but sadly, when I woke up, it didn't exist. No. It's the real sort of clue into him was realizing that everything that was so beyond my reach of understanding, let alone being, pretending to be. The real key, the real sort of grappling hook on trying to build him as a character was realizing that he was utterly part of the same world as us, in a really full human way as well as a physical way. He was an active gay man, but he was also an athlete at marathon level. Olympic marathon runner. I mean, of that level, his times would have competed with the best of the London marathons of the last few years. He was somebody who with that physicality, but also just everything about his sensibility. He was an incredibly, profoundly sensitive child. I think the reason he had a stammer was because he craved parental love that in those days was, well, it wasn't available literally because his parents were abroad for a lot of his very early life. In the Indian diplomatic, in this diplomatic service in India. And it's a bit of an armchair psychologist kind of understanding of it, but I can imagine having a stammer in that time, let alone now, but then, is incredibly isolating. So he retreated into himself, he interiorized his world, his understanding of it. So the confidence or the weirdness or difference that you experience with someone like that is met out of things being overcooked, and brilliant though he is to transform that into communicating, into making easy social bonds, into being able to just play and be at one with who he is and other children, and then into adolescence with his blossoming sexuality, being at the odds with the status quo there. I mean, all the circumstances of his life kind of compounded on him to create him, in my opinion. So when I realised that, I thought, okay, well that is achievable as a human story. You know, there are universalities there that are common to all of us. And while this is a film that celebrates people who are different, and there's a lot to celebrate in his differences, and it is a warning against having prejudices against people who have those differences, whether they're sexual orientations, politics, whatever it may be. You know, it is also, I feel, at its heart, a celebration of someone who we can say belonged to the same species as us, that we can relate to. You know, he wasn't a brain in a jar. He wasn't isolated in the ivory tower of intellectualism. He communicated and was in and part and was really desperately, sensitively responsive to the world and circumstances around him.
Now, you've worked with Keira before.
I have, yeah.
Yes. So you two have kind of...
She gave maybe when she was sort of in her early 80s, I should imagine, and she actually talks about that moment. And still thinking she was very quiet and very feminine, and very, you could tell a kind of amazing kindness, and still had this sort of incredible sense of protection over Alan, even that sort of far on in her life. And she sort of said, yes, no, but I did think that it might be all right. And then I thought, well, no, perhaps not. By Andrew Hodges has a lot of the mathematics that they were working on, and I thought, okay, if I can read this and then I can just take it back, and I'm sure I can take it back far enough to be able to understand it. So I spent 2 solid weeks trying and went, nope.
You're very believable in that.
Documented his reasons for sharing information with the Soviets, and that was a great kind of foundation and point to go and start, the work on John Cairncross as a character, because he is incredibly complex. He genuinely believed that by sharing this information, he was doing his bit to help the war effort. You take any character, and especially when they've existed, there was a responsibility to try and portray them in the most truthful way possible. And for Cairncross, then you have to approach it from the point of view that he did believe he was helping the war effort, and while he was a double agent.
This movie, I mean, many reasons, and this is one of the reasons is that, as Benedict said, you're struck by how little I knew about him. Like I think all of us who is introduced to this project become almost like shameful a little bit, or surprised. Like, I always loved history, and I thought I knew history well, and there was so much I didn't know about him. And so that was one of the things you want to do. You want to be part of. I mean, such a blessing and almost like humbling experience to be allowed to sort of like spread his legacy and be part of that. And then of course I want to make this tribute to people who sort of wasn't like burdened down by normality, who were different in many ways, who could soar free and look at the world from a different angle and had a different view of things and how important that is. Hopefully when people walk out of this movie, they want to celebrate that. And also it also deals with prejudice. I mean, it's both homophobia here and also sexism in a way that these were both these two characters, John Clark and Alan Turing, was both two who was not their full potential, basically because of homophobia and sexism at that time. And it's that is one of our biggest problems still today. It being, you know, our fear or prejudice against somebody who's different than us, you know, be it race, religion, politics, sexuality, anything. So that was sort of like the driving force of why it's become.
And to think that a society and a democracy that he'd helped save from fascism in the Second World War rewarded him with that is the most sickening irony of all, really. And added to that, we had, you know, there had to be a political campaign to have him pardoned 100 years after his birth. I mean, you know, over a longer time. You know, he died at age 41. It was well after 41 years that he was pardoned. So it took longer than his life to pardon a man that did not need pardoning. The only pardon that should exist or come from anybody is him pardoning the people that did that to him. It's you know, it's incredibly important to portray that, and yeah, shocking, absolutely barbaric. And you know, one of the things I discovered about him after I knew about the estrogen injections, I spoke to one of his colleagues who worked with him in Manchester, and I said, look, do you have any memories of how the drug affected him, how it changed him, his mentality or his physicality? And he went, no, not really. He kept himself to himself. He was a very private man. I mean, he was very personable and kind and generous. And when he focused his attention on you and drew you in and collaborated with you, which he did, and he had to, he worked with teams of technicians and mechanics. He wasn't isolated, like I said, in an ivory tower. This guy said, you know, it was wonderful. It felt like a light was being shone on you. And at the same time, you know, I do remember one story he told me where after the 2-year sentence was up, so the course of estrogen was supposed to have finished, he told me that the doctor had been given him weekly estrogen injections and said, well, this is going to get a bit embarrassing for both of us, isn't it? Why don't I give you a slow release device and implant it in your leg, and that way it'll dose you according to your metabolism, so when you eat you'll get your dose of estrogen. And Alan went, oh, okay, and will it stop after 2 years? Yes, it will stop after 2 years. And Alan turned to this colleague he was telling this story to and said, and it's quite a while after 2 years now, and it's still dosing me, so that's not really cricket, is it? And you know, the same man that made that slight, offhand, humorous kind of and incredibly repressed emotional response to it, but trying to make it turn something light, was an element of characterization which I thought was just, I mean, the thing that he did that just blew me away. But the same person, in another much darker moment, went into his kitchen, opened a drawer, pulled out a carving knife and gouged his leg open to try and remove the device. Which is why in the latter moments of the film, in those two scenes, I give him a limp. That's a sort of nod to that. I mean, to think that a man that was that rational, it was that athletic, I mean, his body was important to him as an active sexual man, but also as an athlete, and the mind, his faculty, which brought us such extraordinary work, to think that that person did that to himself, it leaves me in no doubt that he was already looking at his end, and that without doubt it was. Really, that's the trick, you know, something that can focus on you, and in a still moment, you're allowed to think. It was important to me to be active in some of those moments as well, so not just have moments where, I don't know, your eyes are darting around, or there's something beginning to dawn in you. In that moment where he figures that there's a pattern that could be used, the eureka moment, sorry. It's very much thinking, hang on a minute, what did she just say, what did she say, and just replaying it and trying to think of being a step ahead, and also extricating yourself from what is actually happening in the scene. So it's those sort of solitary follow spot moments which film really lends itself to for those moments, and you don't have to be smart to do that.
Although she was the only code breaker, there was actually a lot of women who were working in Bletchley Park at that time, and actually when you look at the kind of whole war effort, you know, it was obviously like the First World War. It was a time when women really went into the workplace, so whether it was munitions factories or on the land or anything like that, you know, they played a huge part in keeping the country going. I mean, what I loved, what I found very interesting about the Joan Clark story, and half of it's covered, you know, the idea of not being able to get a place at the table and that glass ceiling and not being allowed into the room. But the other half, which isn't covered in the film, is that once she did get into the room, she was paid a fraction of what the men were being paid for the same job. And they actually ended up saying that she was a linguist, even though she couldn't speak any other language apart from English, in order to get a tiny little pay rise. You know, and I think particularly when you look at this film, and a little bit like what Morten said, you know, you look at the feminist cause of today, and the arguments are a place at the table and equal pay, and you look at 1940 whatever, and the argument is still a place at the table and equal pay. So of course we've come a long way, but we've still got a long way. Yes, it's quite depressing, isn't it?
You know, I spoke to someone. I mean, this existed beyond the war. The pay scale thing was with rank as well. And I think a lot of people who earned ranks during their war were then demoted. But it seemed to be there was a massive drop off if you were a woman, and a really prejudiced drop off if you were a woman. So I spoke to a woman who worked in intelligence who ended up being a major, and she was told that it would take her 15 years to earn that rank again after the war. And she'd had an exceptional war. You know, I mean, an incredible amount of achievements in it. So she left. But no, I mean, I'm very saddened by that fact. I'm saddened by human nature. I'm saddened by, you know, the fact that where there's nationalism, there is prejudice, and that's risen its ugly head through what we're seeing in the Middle East, through, you know, certain intolerances in societies in Turkey and Russia and Greece with the Golden Dawn, as far as scapegoating individuals or minorities in the case of homosexual men. And it's worrying. Masterful. A while ago, I didn't watch it before I did this version. I think it's a dangerous thing to look at a great actor doing the same role as you're about to do. But no, I was very aware of it. I think it's one of the best things he's ever done. I didn't see it on stage. I saw the televised version of it. A while ago now.
You know, talking to people who've seen him, reading everything, and sort of like analysing it, and sort of like starting a little bit from scratch. Who really wanted to capture sort of like the essence of this wonderful man who was so complicated, and did not go any easy way with it, and sort of like we did together, and Benedict did it by himself, like tremendous research into every aspect of it, and not only trying to go any easy way, but really trying to, how does his mind work? What was the essence of how he functioned, how he thought, how is, you know, and build the character from that. So I think there's no way we could have sort of like looked or copied or be inspired by anybody else done anything. I mean, we wanted to sort of like start off our own center and try to find our own truths and build from that. And we also had the family of volunteering see the movie, which was incredible. There's 17 members of the family. The oldest one was 16 when she's volunteering, and they said, you know, watching Benedict was like watching him having my memory days. So it was a great compliment to the film.